Welcome back, friends, to the shop. So this is part 3 of the I keep saying carpenter's bench, of the mechanics or machinist bench, a heavy-duty bench that we are going to build once that will last us the rest of our life. So off camera, I went ahead and I ripped the rest of the 2x4s, and it looks like 21 is going to work out pretty good. What we have behind us here are just standard 2x4s that I hand-selected at Home Depot. We ripped the edges off. They're ripped down to 3 inches, and I've kind of hand-selected them, and we're going to orient them so that it can be as strong as possible. So the first thing we need to do is to start making a template, because we have to have a whole bunch of holes to drill. We've got 7 holes in each board, and there's 21. So rather than measuring each one out, which would be really tedious and time-consuming, we'll make a template that we can repeat and get some consistency. So we'll do that together here. As we're starting to see here, we're getting a really nice countertop, a heavy-duty top. It's going to be 3 inches thick. Now, ultimately, it's going to finish a little bit less than that because we're going to want to hand plane this smooth, but that's okay. We'll still have plenty of material. Some folks were asking in the comments, why rip both sides? Why not just rip the top if we want just one flat side? There's a couple reasons for that. Well, one primarily is aesthetics. I think it looks crummy when you look at the edge of it and you see that it's not finished the same as the top. I like to have a clean square edge. The other is that over time, maybe after many years or you had a lot of damage on the top, we could flip it. We've already done the work, so we don't have to go in and plane everything. So if you don't want to do that and you want to keep that 1/4 inch, you're more than welcome to do that. But you can see we're going to have a very heavy strong top. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pick out 2 of your best boards, or at least one of them. The one that's going to be on the face, meaning the cleanest one, the one that is free of knots, that has nice square edges, as good as possible, because that's the one that we're going to be looking at, for the rest of our life. So we want to have something that's not like super ratty or ugly or a bunch of wane on it. And then we're going to countersink these, and we'll do this together here. I just did this first one to kind of show you. Now, one thing that I did on my last bench, was I didn't countersink these all threads or threaded rod, and that's always been kind of a nuisance. It sticks out far enough where it catches on things. If you were using a chisel, you run the risk of damaging something that is just, softer metal or it has a nice edge on it. There's just no reason for it. So we're going to make those countersink those so that they're set inside of the wood, so it'll look nicer and it'll just be less things to be a bother to us. And here's a close-up where you can see that countersink. Now, when we put this all together, we'll have room for our flat washer and our nut. And that we can see that's going to, when you countersink this, make sure that nothing sticks above that so that it's nice and clean. You have a flat surface across there. And that's going to look very nice, look substantial, and give it a lot of strength. And unlike that other bench. To do these countersinks, there's lots of different ways you can do it. Of course, the cleanest way to do it is to use a Forstner bit, which is right here. This is a little bit bigger than I probably needed, but it was the only one that I had because I don't have a complete set that would fit that washer, and that's okay. If it's a little bit bigger, I don't think that's a problem. If you don't have a Forstner bit, you can use a spade bit, which is be a little bit more ragged. It's not going to be as clean. I would recommend, maybe talk to someone that you know and ask if you can borrow one. A lot of guys that do woodworking will have these. They're pretty common. You can even buy a cheap one. It might be worth buying it for $7-8 on Amazon to do this, because this is the portion of your bench that you're going to be looking at forever. And to have a raggedy hole here or something that doesn't look nice, that would bother me. So it might be worth the $10 to buy a Forstner bit. You're going to use it in the future for other things, so just something to consider. You could even do that square and chisel that out square if you wanted to with a chisel, and that wouldn't be bad either. So let's go ahead and make our template together here. Our next step is going to be making the ends. The front, which is going to be the face of the bench, and the back side, which is, both of those are going to have to be countersunk. Why countersink the backside? Well, there's a good chance that you're going to push this bench up against a wall, and if you don't countersink it, then you're going to have a gap in the back of the bench, and you don't want that. So you might as well just go ahead and do it. Plus, it'll be universal. You could flip it either way, and it'll be both the same. So the one I've done here, now these particular studs that I picked out for mine, as I said, I got the 92 and 5/8. Those are pre-cut studs so that you can put them with a top plate and a bottom plate, and they'll be 8 foot. Whatever you're choosing, what I would do is go ahead and just find the center of your stud, if that's an 8-foot, or if you're using the pre-cuts like I did, we're gonna come out to having 7 pieces of the all thread in here. How it worked out for me from the center line was 14.5, 29, and 43.5 was the spacing that I used. I didn't want to get too close to the end there because we are going to be trimming it. We're not going to trim this yet. We're going to wait and trim that when the lamination is all done. So leave that alone. Do not cut those. There's a couple other reasons for that as well. And then, of course, I just scribed this across here, and then we'll use our combination square at 1.5 inches and make these marks. Then we'll go ahead and drill these together. Use your combination square and find center. I preset this so I don't have to measure every time. I can just go along and mark all 7 at one time. Now be sure, do not drill the hole, which is going to be a 1/2 inch hole. Now remember, the all thread that we're using is 3/8 of an inch, so we want to use a drill bit that's an 1/8 inch bigger than the all thread. That gives us the ability to have a little bit of adjustment for all the imperfections. So use a 1/2 inch bit with your 3-inch all thread. What I have been doing to help find that center is just use an awl or an ice pick and then start a little hole right there on my line, and then carefully line it up. If you want, you could use a pilot bit, but I found that this seems to be close enough. And we're gonna make sure our drill bit's straight, have something underneath so you don't drill through your good wood. I just did what I told you guys not to do. I was supposed to use my Forstner bit first. All right, let me turn off the camera, redo all the layout, and start over again. All right, so we're going to use our awl again. Make sure you find that center. And the wood is forgiving. That's what's nice working about it. And if you put it in the wrong spot, you can kind of manipulate things around and get it where you want it. Now, here's what we're going to do. Now, this particular Forstner bit is the perfect depth if I just go to the top of it. So I'll put that in there, and we'll do this first. Now that gives us inside, there's a little dimple in there. We can take our drill bit, make sure you're straight both ways the best you can, and then drill through. Good grief, this is amateur hour big time here. Well, what do you expect from a homeowner? Here's a potential problem that could really bite us when we're putting everything together. I was not paying attention when I was drilling here, the 1/2 inch hole, and I'm on a knot, and the drill bit slipped off and then started drilling off center. Our awl thread will never go through there. So what I'm going to try to do, and if you run into that, I think this will probably work, is use this as a guide. We can use our face board here as a kind of a template and sandwich these together. Make sure you flush the ends from the edge you laid out, and we should be able to use this as a guide, and hopefully this will guide our drill bit if we're careful through the hole in the right place. On second thought, let's just leave that alone. That's not going to be the only problem we have when we have so many holes to drill. They're not all going to be perfect. But the reason why we're going to leave those ends wild is that so if we do get those deviations, these boards can move a little bit. Once we get everything bolted and clamped down, then we'll take a skill saw or whatever saw we have and we'll cut those ends flush. So I'm not worried about it. And having this hole an 1/8 inch bigger than our awl thread, this being 3/8, this being 1/2, is going to give us some wiggle room. So let's just go with it, and then if we come up to another problem, then we'll just deal with it then. Before we drill any holes, we want to make sure that we have the boards oriented the way that we want them. What we're looking for here is we want to put our best foot forward, use the best side that we have. You see, if you have little divots like this here, maybe that's something you want to flip over and see if the other side is better, or even move it to the back where it's not so noticeable. Another thing we're going to watch out for is these knots. These knots here are going to, once the wood cures and dries and we beat on this and use it for a while, these are all going to break out. So that's something else to consider. Now, it's not the end of the world, so one thing that, what my granddad did on his bench is that he did something similar to this, but then he covered it, he skinned it with a piece of 16th inch sheet metal, and then bent the end over so that he could weld on it. You know, so if that's something you want to do, you can do that. This will be perfect for that. If you're just going to leave it wood, and I mean, if you are going to weld on something like this, just get yourself a piece of, you know, like a 3 foot long, 4 foot long piece of sheet metal that you can throw up on there when you're doing that. But it's nicer to work on wood than it is on metal if you're not a, you know, hardcore fabricator. There is also a school of thought on this that when you're looking at the grains here, that you want to alternate these. What that means is that when you see these radial lines in the tree, like this here, if you don't necessarily want them all running the same way, if you can alternate them. So have one going this way, have one going this way, and then back and forth, if it's possible. So you'll just have to kind of play around with it and look. And the reason for this is that they'll kind of fight against each other. If you orient these all the same way, and they will tend to all want to kind of twist and help each other pull this thing out of alignment. Whereas if you alternate them, it's kind of the principle behind like a P-38 Lightning, right? Where the counter-rotating props, where the yaw of one prop overrides the yaw of the other one. And stay clear from, if you have a choice when you're picking this out, don't buy wood that has the center, the heart. So you see right there, that's a little heart right there. When you're buying wood, you can ask them, I want it to be free of heart when you're doing like really high-end stuff, because that will move in a much different direction than something that's cut to the outside of it. So just something to consider. Just go through your boards and flip them and alternate them so that they're going to be as good as possible.